Hey, I'm Anthony, and this is a true story. It's called The Night We Should Have Died. As we hurtled down the dirt track under the vibrant specks of the southern stars, I was swamped with fear. We were driving too fast. To our immediate left was a wide and deep channel, like a straight man-made river. We shouldn't have been in the area at all. Someone had a key to the gate that had given us access. I was too young to speak up. The other two passengers, my best friends, were also silent. It was obvious that the speed was insane. We were lucky not to have been wiped out on the way to the track from the river, in and around huge native trees. Perhaps it's simply human to believe that everything will be alright. It was far from alright. It was 2 a.m, and we were all drunk. If I had known what was about to happen, I never would have gotten in that car at all. But we are never blessed with such insight. In many ways, it was a great summer, one of the best. We wanted more out of life, and for a fair portion of the time, we were bored, as all teenagers seem to be. But of course, those hot days were the pinnacle of carefree youth, and we were ignorant of their significance. As with all good times, they were also too short. We would swim at the local pool on occasion, but those days seemed to be almost over. Life changes, often without you being aware until it has passed. Before we knew it, those weeks would be over too, and slip almost unnoticed into our personal history. We were on the cusp of something greater. Around the corner, adulthood. Yet it wasn't all fun and games. I was 17 and unemployed. I was living with my grandparents in a dead-end town of 600, the one I had grown up in. I was genuinely worried that I would never get a job. Hanging out with my friends and drinking was more than just an escape. It was the zenith of our lives. The rest of the time, we were mostly powerless, lost, directionless. Things would change, but we couldn't see that then. Too young to know better. The future can't seem bright when you're living in the dark. After the car crash, we were lucky to have a future at all. There were 4 of us. Andrew, a gregarious guy of 16 with a great personality, and myself. There was also Lenny, a guy I had gone to high school with. He was just 1 day older than me. He had been a great mate until he went off to join the army. It was a Friday night and he had returned from training, but only for a short break. Like me, he was still 17. The final of the 4 was Bruce. For some reason, his nickname was Beasting. I have no idea why. He was another guy from town, a year older, who had a car. A small 4-door Datsun, a typical vehicle for a teen's first car, especially a kid from the country. It was second-hand, and he would have bought it himself or be paying it off, the working class way of things. I knew him quite well too. He was one of those guys who knew everyone, loud and confident, without being overtly arrogant. His dad was the primary school principal, so he came from middle-class roots, but Bruce was country to the core. We were at a big party down the river. It was at a different location than our usual swimming holes, one unfamiliar to me. The reason being that it was located near a channel, which was wide and deep and gated off from the public. Crown land, I believe. Someone had secured a key somehow, and we were driving on the dirt track that ran parallel to the channel. Between the channel and river was about 300 meters of trees, 10 stories high. The channel was actually higher than the river, so just off the track there was a steep slope to the trees. About 1 kilometre or so along the channel track, jutting out from the side like a big cancer growth, was a big hole where the council or water board had been dredging. I don't know why they had been digging there, but it was deep. Subsequently, this hole was full of water. It was like an upside down witch's hat. The dirt road had to navigate this hole, so it ran along the rim in a tight semicircle. It was prevalent, actually necessary, to drive very slowly around the circumference, no faster than 20 kilometers per hour. There were two reasons for this extra caution. On one side was the deep funnel of water, and on the other the sharp slope to the wall of trees, a place no car could go. However, our destination was further down the end of the track, where the ground was more level. A separate track ran off the main one and snaked through the trees to the river. Andrew's older brother Darren drove Andrew, Lenny and I to this riverside festivity in his second-hand utility. The intention was to sleep the night on the riverbank. We had sleeping bags only, no tent, but we planned on getting so drunk that it would not matter how uncomfortable we were. It all sounded ideal. So, what was the problem? Only our very youth, surreptitiously working against us. Before long, it seemed as though every person there was drunk. A wasted mass of 30 young people, mostly guys, sprawled out across the grass like strewn rubbish. We might not have all liked each other, but there was no tension or sign of any trouble. Apart from a few sore heads and maybe some vomit, it appeared as though the night would go by without major incident. Late in the piece, the bee sting decided he was hungry. Hunger was a strange concept. The party seemed well organised. What else do you need other than beer? There was basically no food other than a few packets of potato chips, which had been demolished early like minnows in a piranha orgy. We decided that we were hungry too. Who knows what we were thinking, but you can guarantee it wasn't in any degree sensible. Bruce, aka Beasting, decided it was preferable to drive back into town and get some munchies rather than go hungry. God knows we were intended to get food at 2 a.m. It was a simple detail we had overlooked. We were drunk and thinking only of munchies. I can't remember volunteering for such an expedition, but I must have, as did the others. All I know is that Andrew leapt into the front passenger side. I sat in back behind him. Lenny sat next to me, behind the driver. It was only a little car, but fortunately they built them a bit tougher in those days. It was about to be put to the test. When the bee sting fired the engine, the bravado came with it. In seconds we were flying along, the G-forces throwing us back in our seats, windows down, the warm summer night air in our faces. The track was not a straight one, it curved around trees. They roared past like some crazy computer game. I was nervous as all hell. Not so much a knot in the stomach like butterflies, but a taut terror, that of imminent peril. I thought we were going to crash for sure. How long could he keep control at this speed? Of course I wanted him to stop, but I was stupid and didn't say anything. This is part of the problem with being young guys. They won't speak out in fear of being labelled a pussy. It's insanity in a bottle, or in this case, a 1977 four-door. He was driving like a fucking idiot, full of the cockiness of a testosterone junkie on overload. The headlights swayed over the tree trunks, looming like giant stilts and looking down on this speedy suicide wish. We swayed in our seats. I'm not sure where I put my belt on, but now it was firmly in place. We burst out of the trees like the Millennium Falcon, but the bee sting was no Han Solo. more like a horny Chewbacca on crack in pursuit of a fairy harem. We hit the dirt track. We turned hard to the right, and suddenly we were running parallel with the channel. I felt a little safer on this straight stretch, moonlight now visible, bouncing off the still running waters, but we weren't in the clear yet. He was still driving far too fast, and we were heading straight towards that tight half circle with the ditch full of water, the upside down witch's hat. Somebody said I don't know who. They obviously had reservations too. Maybe somebody should say something. Time to speak up. He's driving way too fast to navigate this corner. This is fucking madness. Too late. Just as it appeared we were going to fly straight into the water, he spun the wheel to the right, as though he were a rally car driver, the tail sliding across the dirt like rice on tracing paper. We skated off the track, out of control, hit a small stump protruding out of the earth, and suddenly we were airborne, flipping high and spinning sideways. Now, I've read and heard many times, as I'm sure you have, that for people in this situation, their lives flash before their eyes. Time stands still. Well, I hadn't lived long enough to have my life flash before my eyes, but time unquestionably slowed down, all the way to slow motion. Perhaps it's something to do with the body realizing it's in danger. It enters into a hyper-real mode. All the senses tuned, taking in every detail. The body pumping full of adrenaline and shifting upwards into a mechanism of optimum performance. I remember in absolute clear detail every nanosecond of that car twisting through the air like a football. Now I know how a tumble dryer feels. The wheels had no traction. I saw the ground pass by beneath me, and yet it was above my head. It was almost peaceful. There was an overwhelming sensation that we had no control. We were in the hands of something bigger than us. Perhaps fate, or perhaps nothing at all. I don't mean that a god was watching over us, but a force of unknown origin had yet to determine whether we would live or die. We were merely in its power and had to ride it out to the conclusion, whatever that thing may be. I didn't hear my heartbeat or anything so ridiculous, but there was a bizarre silence. I guess the engine was still going, but I didn't hear it. I only heard the hollow sounds of a vacuum and little more. The world righted itself. We had spun a full 360 degrees, but now we hit something hard, the metal framework jarring with a blur like a free-falling elevator, and we were thrust against our seatbelts. Thank God we all had them on. The world had stopped twirling, but it took my head a second longer to understand that it had. We sat there for a few seconds, though it felt like much longer. Shock. What had just happened? I was abruptly aware of a new sensation. It was rising quickly up my legs. Water. I spoke first. Let's get the fuck out of here. I tried the door, but it wouldn't open. The water was surging up over the seat and up my thighs. I unclipped my belt. I wound the window down. I heaved myself out, crawling through the window. I fell out, sliding into the water. I was outside of the car and immediately felt better. I was aware that the car was sinking. The taillights are on, but I watched them hit the water and go out. The others were getting out too. I swam around the rear of the car. I don't know how, but the car had landed the right way up. The front wheels just on the very point where the water meets the bank. I swam to the sloped bank, perched myself on the edge and sat there in a type of stupor. Holy shit. Lenny joined me. Fucking hell. The rear of the car sunk, but because the front was on the edge, it reached a certain stage, then settled on a 45-degree angle. For a moment, I thought the whole vehicle was going to slide backwards in the water, but it didn't. "Oh, fuck," Andrew yelled. "What is it?" said Lenny. The bee sting went to him, but Andrew wasn't talking. He was in shock. One thing was for certain. We were all instantly sober. "I think there's something in my eye," Andrew said. I got up and walked around the bank. I could see this huge drag mark through the dust where the car had slid. I had also spied the chunk of dead wood sticking out of the ground that we had hit. A portion of a collapsed tree, partly buried in the earth. Andrew was by the front of the car, perched on the bank, but bent over. "Lean back," said Lenny, straightening him up. Andrew's eye fluttered while Lenny tried to examine it. Bizarrely, the front headlights were still on. Most of the engine was probably dry. The front windscreen was shattered, a lot of the remnants on the front seats. Otherwise, the car seemed intact. So were we, somehow. It was a remarkable landing, the water having softened the blow. Lenny dug around. Andrew squinted but struggled to keep his eye from closing. He was tough and kept his tongue. "Got it." Lenny held up his finger. "Glass." Andrew groaned. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" He slowly shook his head, a smile creeping in. "Yeah, mate, I think." I looked closer. His eye was red. "You sure?" "It's a bit sore, but it's okay now." How his eyeball wasn't cut up was yet another dose of fortune. We looked around, trying to work out what the hell had happened. Less than 30 feet on from where we had taken flight was the tight bend and the sharp drop to the legion of trees. If the car hadn't spun out where it did, we would have plummeted off the sharp bend just ahead and ended up in the trees. We would have all been killed, no doubt. When I think now of all the possibilities, it really was the best possible outcome. What if the car had landed on its side or on its roof? We would have been crushed or drowned. The factors involved that allowed us to walk away virtually unscathed is nothing short of miraculous. The four of us should be dead. This book should not exist. Many young men and women, kids really, do not have it so fortunate. There are far too many vehicle-related deaths in rural Australia, particularly involving youth. The fallout is enormous. Everyone knows someone affected. All I know is that I came very close to adding to the terrible statistics. For some reason, very probably no reason at all, other than blind luck, I was spared that night. We walked back to the party. Later, Darren backed up his ute and with a sturdy piece of rope towed the car out. Because it had landed on its wheels, the water had cushioned the impact. We weren't angry at Beasting, other than calling him an idiot, but a part of me resented him later on. Actually, I'm angrier now than I was then. I never saw much of him following the accident, despite the fact that I quite liked him. There were immediate ramifications. The anxiety began. It was a year before I would get into a car with anyone other than my father, and that was only because I had no choice. And all these years later, I'm still a nervous passenger and paranoid about road safety. Yet, I'm very grateful for all those experiences from then until now, the life I should not have had. And that story is in my collection of stories and poetry called Us and Them and the Things in Between, and the story The Night We Should Have Died, and that is 100% true story, a miraculous escape. And yes, unfortunately, those sorts of accidents happen all the time, and it sort of sends shivers up my spine every time it does. And my heart breaks a little because I know that could have been us. And someone else's family out there ruined by such stupidity and just youthful folly. That book is available at anthonyjlangfordbooks.com or on Amazon. Thanks so much for listening, and please leave a comment, like or subscribe. Thanks so much. Take care now. Bye.